All right, we're going to head back over to the book of Ecclesiastes tonight. We are now in chapter 6, so after tonight we'll have gone halfway through the book, which is encouraging, I think. We're getting there. Last week we ended talking at the end of chapter 5 about the vanity of the more mentality, mainly talking on the topic of money. And so we talked about the problem of that desire for more money in life and the vanity, the emptiness of it. And tonight's going to be kind of a continuation of that same thought. But starting now and moving forward in the book of Ecclesiastes, we're going to see Solomon take kind of a step back. He's been very specific about certain vanities of life. We talked about money. We've talked about other things in the past, in the earlier chapters. And so he takes a step back in chapter 6, and it's almost a little bit of a review. But he's actually going to get into a little more of a hopeful aspect of this whole topic of vanity and what really matters in life. The title of the message tonight is The Power to be Satisfied. The power to be satisfied. This whole concept of finding satisfaction in life is an interesting one. It's an interesting study just within history, the philosophy of man. And I found an article that was written in response to a letter that was written to the author. And I'm just going to read you a portion of the letter. And it goes like this. It says, it's from a young girl in her college years. It says, in a population of 6 billion plus people globally, it is hard not to feel like another number. I find life so disenchanting the more I pursue things I thought were my dreams. I'm at possibly the top university in the world getting my master's to make the world a better place. I don't know what she's studying, but apparently it's making the world a better place. Yet I lack the joy and excitement that I should have. If this were just my problem, I would figure this out. And it's interesting to me. She said, if this was only for me, I'd figure it out somehow. I don't know what she means by that or how she thinks she'd figure it out. But she goes on, if this were my problem, I would just figure it out. But I think so many of us deal with this. We can have so much to be grateful for, and we very well might be grateful. However, when the achievement of a dream fails to make us as satisfied as we thought it would, it calls the very credibility of dreaming into question. And she's drawing back to what? The whole philosophy, especially here in America, of follow your dreams. Don't get stuck doing a job or a life that you don't want to be in or that you're bored with. Stick to your dreams. Follow it. That Disney, princess mentality. Follow your dreams, and you will have a satisfying life. She's saying it doesn't feel like that's how it is right now. I appreciate the process of life, one might say. One might say, nothing seems to be that exciting, though. Nothing could surprise me anymore. I was wondering if you had any insight on this issue, i.e., what I call the I can't get no satisfaction syndrome, which we know from the song. And so she goes on, to explain this problem that she's experiencing, and she's wise enough to realize this is not just her. This seems to be maybe in her conversations with other college students, other people in the world. She's realized that others feel the same way, that following their dreams, trying to pursue and to do good in life, to make the world a better place, even in those good goals aren't always arriving at the satisfaction that she thought or other people think that we should arrive at. And so this author takes this and immediately admits that's a hard question, and then goes on to try to answer it. And it's not a Christian website, not a Christian, as far as I can tell from what he wrote. But this is what he wrote. I'll just kind of summarize it in his 10 points. He wrote back and said, here's what you ought to do, at least to get started on the right path of finding satisfaction. Make small, positive changes, all right? Small, not big ones, small, positive changes. Banish negative thinking. So eliminate negative thinking. That's a good one. So stop thinking negatively about life, and it's going to be a lot more satisfying. Number 3, look at the wonderful side of things. I don't know what that means. Look at the wonderful side of things. Look at the good side, I guess. And in a bad situation, try to find the good in it. Exercise. That was number 4. Exercise a lot. So if you're feeling unsatisfied, you might not be exercising enough. Appreciate loved ones. That's number 5. Number 6 is pursue a passion. So if you have, perhaps you're not satisfied with life because you just haven't found your passion yet. So find what your passion is and pursue that a little bit more. Number 7, talk and work with other excited people. So if you're not excited, you just need to surround yourself with exciting people, and it'll rub off on you probably. Number 8, take time to recharge. So get some rest when you need to. Don't work too hard. Number 9, get great feedback. All right, so have people come to you and be honest with you about what your problems are and how you can improve in things. That'll help you have more satisfactory results and a happier life. And number 10, the final one, help others. And this was the advice that was given to find satisfaction in life. There's a few good tidbits in there. I'm not going to be too negative on it. But I couldn't help finish that and think, that's it? In our advanced lifestyle that we live today, thousands of years, the advancements that we have in science and in philosophy, that's the best we got for finding satisfaction in this life. The reality is that it is the longing that leaves man empty and unsatisfied. This longing that we have is one that cannot be fixed. Even if someone were to be able to follow every one of those steps to the T, to the letter, would they be satisfied if they were to accomplish all of that? And the answer is no, they would not be. And if that girl were to write me the same letter, I would simply respond and say, can I just have you read Ecclesiastes chapter 6? Because what you're explaining and what you're kind of marveling and just now figuring out is exactly what Ecclesiastes, the book of Ecclesiastes, Solomon says and explains and talks about the vanity of it. You know, our problem is that we take, with our dissatisfaction with life, is that we take and we divide our physical needs, the physical needs, the desires that we want, we take those and we divide them from our spiritual needs on the other side. So we say, okay, I have my spiritual needs right here. So whatever that entails spiritually, you know, that's what I have on this side. And then I have my physical needs over here. Whatever my physical desires, my fleshly desires are, then those are over here, and I seek to satisfy those in physical means, by physical means. And we tend to divide the two as believers oftentimes, and that's where we run into trouble, we run into problem. And perhaps some of you, though, find yourself in a similar boat as this girl writing that letter. You've invested so much of your life in your job, your toys, your family, your hobbies, your accumulation of wealth, and you feel that pang of desire for something else, something more to quench that desire in you. That desire for satisfaction. If I had the opportunity to answer again, I would say read the book of Ecclesiastes. And specifically here, we're going to find the answer to what this girl was struggling with, is mulling over in her mind and could not figure out the answer. And ultimately, the answer she got really wasn't the full answer. So the preacher here, Solomon in Ecclesiastes, gives us two main points we find in chapter 6. And again, it's interesting to note that we're right here at the halfway point. We've heard a lot about the vanities of life. We'll still hear some more. But now Solomon is shifting his gaze to a bit more of a promising hope. And I'm going to warn you, as we read through this, you're going to think this doesn't sound promising. But when you read it and you understand what he's actually saying, the underlying message there is much promise, much hope that we can take away as believers of Christ. For sake of time, I'm not going to read the entire chapter. We will take it in portions as we move along. But I'm going to begin in verse 1 and go down to verse 6, starting off. So Ecclesiastes chapter 6, look down with me at verses 1 through 6. It says, "There is an evil which I have seen under the sun, and it is common among men. A man to whom God hath given riches, wealth, honor, so that he wanteth nothing for his soul of all that he hath desired, a man who God hath given riches, wealth, and honor, so that he wanteth nothing for his soul of all that he desireth, yet God giveth him not power to eat thereof, but a stranger eateth it. This is vanity, and it is evil, an evil disease. If a man beget 100 children and live many years, so that the days of his years be many, and his soul be not filled with good, and also that he hath no burial, I say that an untimely birth is better than he. For he cometh in with vanity, and departeth in darkness, and his name shall be covered with darkness. Moreover, he hath not seen the sun, nor known anything that hath more rest than the other. Yea, though he hath 1,000 years twice told, yet hath he seen no good. Do not all go to one place." So he begins in verse 1. He says, I've seen a sore evil, a great evil here. He paints this picture of a man who has everything. You can't help but wonder if he's even talking about himself here. This just sounds very similar, right? So he's talking of a man that has everything. He has the money, he has the wealth, he has possessions, he has the glory, he has the honor. Everything that he could possibly desire, that men desire in life, this is the guy that has it, all right? So kind of similar stories that we've been hearing in the past here. And that's an interesting thing to think about a little bit, on what do people want in life. Found this article that said the top 10 things that people want in the 21st century. And here's the list. A high-paying job, save money, save time, look better. It's a good one. Learn something new. It's a good one. You and your children have longer lives. That would be something we'd want more of. To be comfortable in life, to not be lonely, to be popular, and to have more pleasure. And I laughed at the end of that because I thought, how is that any different than any other century, right? This is what we want in the 21st century. I don't know what we want in the 20th century, the 19th century. And the reality is we read something like that, we think, okay, Solomon was talking about the same stuff thousands of years ago. And the reality is that we are predictable beings, aren't we? As much as we talk about, the world talks about how things have evolved, and the world has evolved, we have evolved. We have not evolved in this area for sure, right? Men, from the moment Adam and Eve sinned and fell in the garden, we have struggled with the same lusts, the same desires for thousands and thousands of years. We're exactly the same. These aren't the 21st century desires. These are just the universal, throughout history, desires of men. We used to play this game when we were younger, and actually, we played it, actually a few of us played it not too long ago, actually, just for fun, where, if you're just hanging out with some friends and you say, okay, if you could be anybody, who would you be? Anybody play that before? It's a fun one. Someone's played that. Raise your hand if you played that before. All right, well, the one that we played, yeah, all right, there we go. Okay, well, some deprived people here, that's okay. I encourage you to go try to play this sometime. It reveals a lot about you, your friends, your family, whoever you play it with. All right, so the whole thing goes, you just go around and you say, okay, if you could be anybody in this world right now, who would you pick? And it's fun because it's revealing right away about what that person thinks is important or what that person kind of idolizes personally. And it's fun to think of it for yourself. Who would I be? If I could just turn into somebody right now in this world, who would it be? And most of the time, you get athletes or actors or billionaires or something along those lines. But the reality is every one of them fulfilled one of those things that I just listed off there as common desires of men in this world. And except unless you're playing with, in Sunday school, then you have a kid, I want to be the Apostle Paul when I grow up, Then it's like, okay, we got to set parameters here. You can't be from the Bible. Because that's no fun, right? You want to find out really what they're like, what they really want. But it's very revealing on who and what we idolize, and ultimately, while there may be different venues, there may be different ways in which this comes and fleshes itself out, it's the same stuff. We're looking for money, for power, for fame. It's all the same. The same stuff. I think it's good to notice, though, that Solomon here does not tell us that we shouldn't want or enjoy these things. So don't misunderstand what's going on here. He doesn't say that the evil is that these people have these things or that it is their desire for these things that's evil. It's not. He says that the sore evil, the great tragedy, is that men continue to live and they continue to die with these things and never really know how to enjoy them. So the problem is not in the things. It's that men, the problem, the great evil, the great travesty of life is that people have these things and they go through their entire life and they don't actually enjoy them to the full satisfaction. The point of Solomon's message here is not to condemn the wealthy, the famous, or the successful people of the world. And that's something that we can take away as well. A lot of times we perhaps run into somebody that has done very well in life. God has blessed richly. We walk into their $1 million home or their, whatever, their beautiful car. We see all the things that they have. And we can be very quick to judge them and say, oh, these people are materialistic. These are those materialistic Christians. They really don't love God because look at what they have. No, there's no biblical foundation for that. We're assuming their heart. God has blessed them and blessed them richly, and we ought to rejoice with them in that. There's nothing wrong with having riches or having fame or popularity. That's not the issue. Don't be distracted by that. The issue is not truly finding the joy and satisfaction in those things through Christ. We're going to flesh that out in a little bit here as we go on in the message. So the truth here is you can have the richest man on one side and you have the poorest man on the other side. And based on what Solomon is saying here, both men, richest and poorest, can be equally satisfied and happy. And this is probably why you don't see too many successful Christian motivational speakers, because you lose most people right there. Like, it's like, you're telling me I can be poor and be happy when this guy over here who has absolutely everything in life is going to be just as happy as this guy? No way at all. Why? Because we associate our happiness with our material possessions, don't we? And what we have and what we possess. That's where our happiness lies. That's where that the world cannot get past that. We've talked about that some in the past as we've studied through Ecclesiastes. That's not the thing that's going on here. It all lies in the mindset that we have as we approach the concept of joy and satisfaction in things in this life. The reality that every good gift that God gives can only and truly be ultimately enjoyed if it is God and God alone that empowers us to enjoy it. It's God that empowers us to enjoy it. We're going to see what that looks like in a moment. I was trying to think of a good illustration of this. Most of you know that Megan and I like coffee, like a lot. And so imagine with me if, let's say I accumulated to myself coffee beans, just lots and lots of coffee beans. And every opportunity I have at coffee beans, people knew I like coffee, so they'd give me coffee. And so it came down, let's say I just had a warehouse like the size of this auditorium right now, and it was filled to the top, just one massive mountain of coffee beans. It would smell good, that's for sure. So I walk in and I have my coffee beans, and I love drinking coffee. But let's just say in this world that I'm in here, I have no access to filter, to a grinder, to water maybe. I mean, I don't have the materials that I need to make coffee. I have no capabilities of making the coffee that I so richly enjoy. What good is my massive mountain of coffee beans to me if I don't have the means to enjoy it? It's not going to be very helpful for me, right? Now imagine on the other side, another guy likes coffee a lot too, and he only happens to have a cup full of coffee beans. That's it. I have my mountain in here. He has his cup over there. But he's got a coffee maker and a filter and a grinder. Who's really enjoying their coffee? The man that has the mountain of coffee beans, or the man that maybe only has a cup, but he has the means by which to enjoy those coffee beans? That's the image that we're talking about here. It does not lie in how much you have. The richest, the poorest, it does not matter. There is glory, there is enjoyment, there is pleasure, there is satisfaction to be found when Christ is at the center, when it is Christ that is empowering us to enjoy those things. Solomon here uses some illustrations in verses 3 through 6. Look down at verse 3. He says, "If a man beget 100 children and live many years, so that the days of his years be many, and his soul be not filled with good, and also that he hath no burial, I say that an untimely birth is better than he. For he cometh in with vanity and departeth in darkness, and his name shall be covered with darkness. Moreover, he hath not seen the sun, nor known anything. This hath more rest than the other. Yea, though he live 1,000 years, twice told, yet hath he seen no good. Do not all go to one place." So here we have the image of a 2,000-year-old man, okay? He's got 1,000 years twice told. He has great wealth. He lacks nothing his heart desires. He has 100 children. Imagine that. He has 100 children. And why would Solomon kind of put that in there? That's very much of a cultural thing. The greatest sign of wealth of a family back in that time would have been the amount of children that they had. Basically, kids were the insurance policy back then. So if you had a kid, then that meant that you would have somebody that would support you and help you and provide for you when you got too old to do so for yourself. And the more kids you got, the more wealthy you would be. And so the idea here, the whole 100 kids, that means you've got the best insurance policy the world could offer you at the time, okay? You had a lot of kids, you provided, but it was also very much of an honor thing. It was a great privilege, a great honor. The children were very important back then, not today. But it was very much of a priority. It was part of that culture. And so a real sign of a privileged, a blessed man was the amount of children that he had. That was massive back in that culture. And then you have this picture of a stillborn baby that Solomon talks about here. And I want to be really careful here because it's possible there's someone here that had to go through the hardship, the gut-wrenching experience of losing a baby, having a stillborn baby. And my heart goes out to you. And Solomon's goal here, mine, is certainly not to make light of that. And he's not saying in this passage that having a stillborn baby is a good thing. That's not the point of this at all. It's a terribly sad, gut-wrenching thing to go through. And so my heart goes out to you if that is your case. But what Solomon here is doing is he's painting the picture. A picture of the ultimate futility of life. And if you can imagine the sadness of a stillborn baby. And anyone else in the world looks at that and thinks that's futility of life right there. To go through the process of being birthed in this world only to die immediately. And what Solomon is saying here is that it would better that happen to someone than to them live 2,000 years, have 100 children, have the perfect life, the absolute perfect life, and die unsatisfied. It's a big picture he's painting here. It's a serious picture he's painting here. So he says, better than the rich of many children in years who is not satisfied and does not have a proper burial. It's a sign of respect, of honor, of a life well lived. Better to be a stillborn than to live a life of unsatisfaction. So here's the truth. A wealthy person and a stillborn share the same fate. We all go to the same place, the grave, don't we? So what's the difference between the two? At least one does not suffer through the agony, the trial, the suffering of life, and the unsatisfaction at the end. That's the picture that's painted for us here. And here's where things get a little more personal feeling than perhaps other verses and chapters that we've looked at in the past. Last week we talked about money, and that may be personal to some, but it's not the most personal. Solomon now isn't just talking about the material possessions of the world as potential vanity in life. What does he talk about in this passage and the image here of the man who has not had satisfaction in life and is living in vanity? We say this: if you were to ask any parent in America, what would you consider to be the most valuable and important thing to you in this world? What would the answer, hopefully, and most often be? Our children, right? And that would be a good answer. What is the most important thing to you as parents in this world? You would say your children. And if the Lord blesses us at some point, that would be my answer as well. It would be my children. Yet what does Solomon do in this passage here? He specifically talks about children and this man being blessed with children. And yet, what happens? He dies satisfied or unsatisfied? He's unsatisfied. It's a tragedy. He dies unsatisfied, not because of just the wealth side of things or the possessions or the talent side of things or whatever. It specifically talks about his children here. The moralistic side of America would argue that a life with family prioritized at the center is the most meaningful and satisfying way to live. And we could harken back to, the days of Leave It to Beaver and wish we could go back to those days when families were perfect, right? I always thought that. I was like, man, it was a perfect world back then. Black and white world was a perfect world. And that wasn't the case, though. There's a great priority put on our children and making our children, our families, the center of our lives. But I believe that putting family at the dead center of a Christian life could potentially be one of the most deceptive lies that Christian believers believe today. Because it sounds so right, doesn't it? What's the most important thing? My family is the most important thing. That's right, it is. And you're almost right. You're almost right. Family, children, grandchildren, As great a blessing as they are not your source of satisfaction. Parents, grandparents, they're not. We see here on the other side of the coin that Solomon speaks of a long and presumably healthy life. And this too is considered a great thing in our culture and culture back then. We all kind of have our age that we hope to make, right? And it's like, and we talk about, when someone passes away, well, how old were they? Well, they were like 95, 98. Oh, they lived a full, good life. So that's good. Good for them. We view dying at old age as a good thing, right? The same was the case back then, but we're talking about 2,000 years here. So this man had a lot of years to live, a lot of things to accomplish in that life. How often do we hear at funerals, he lived a long, full life, and there's a sigh of relief, kind of like he did, and that's okay. That's good. But his satisfaction obviously was not found in the amount of time he was able to live on this earth. He had 2,000 years. According to this illustration that Solomon is putting before us here. He had 2,000 years to live, and yet he still died unsatisfied. So satisfaction can't be found in your age either by just living a full life and having a whole lot of experiences. Doesn't bring satisfaction. Solomon is essentially saying here, you can basically live 100 lifetimes and gain riches, gain family, and you will die worse off than a stillborn child. Who was never able to take the first breath. So what are you living for? What is it? Money, glory, fame, your kids, your job, success, comfort. And again, as I mentioned last week, the way to answer that truthfully for yourself is you pick whatever it is right now that you're in question about and say, if it was taken from me right now, what would my reaction be? If any object, if any person was taken from me right now, what would my reaction be? Would it devastate my life completely? As I was preparing for this, I couldn't help but think of, some of you heard, a couple of years ago, I had a friend, fellow youth pastor who was a youth pastor in Indianapolis. His name was Chad Phelps. He and his wife, Courtney, they died in a bus accident, if you remember that. And I've tried to keep, in somewhat contact with those that are from that area. I'm actually very good friends with the new youth pastor there, and we've kept in contact some. And I believe I was talking to him, or maybe somebody else that was in contact with the father. And the father, his name is Pastor Phelps. He's the pastor of the church that Chad was at. And I remember asking him, I think it was the last time I saw him, maybe at the Wilds perhaps. And I just asked, how are things going? How's Pastor doing? And I'll never forget what he told me. He said, he's doing really well, honestly. And I said, really? He's like, yeah, I talked to him, and I asked him specifically how he was taking the loss of his son and his daughter-in-law. And his response was, I've never been more at peace about where they're at. And my first reaction to that was, oh, you mean since they died, he's feeling more at peace? And he was like, no, he meant even when they were living, he's never been more at peace with where they're at and about the thought of them. And I was shocked, and I was rebuked by that. The most precious thing in the world to that man certainly was his kids, without a doubt. And yet, he understood the principle that was talked about here. That like everything, his satisfaction is not in his kids, it's not in his money, it's nothing this world has to offer. Those are gifts from God, who when we place God at the dead center of that, that's where we find the satisfaction. Not in the things. Not even in our family, as precious as they are. And there are some here that have had to go through that pain, perhaps, of losing your child. Now, I don't know what that's like. But you've had to learn this firsthand, that it is Christ and Christ alone that has to be the center before you can recover from something like that. And there are some that I know of who have lost their faith, in a sense. They have run from Christ. They have run from God in the face of a tragedy such as this, whether that is a family member or a relative distant relative or money or possessions, whatever the tragedy might be. They lost it, and that was it. What they were putting their satisfaction in was gone. And life was over for them, and they could not recover from it because, why? God wasn't their satisfaction. It wasn't truly their satisfaction. Everything is a gift from God. The second truth that we see here in Ecclesiastes chapter 6 is this, and it's the reality of limitations. The second truth that we have to come to grips with if we understand the power of satisfaction, the true power that satisfaction comes from, is coming to grips with the reality of our limitations. Verses 7 through 12, would you look down at it with me? It says, all the labor of man is for his mouth, and yet the appetite is not filled. For what hath the wise more than the fool? What hath the poor that knoweth to walk before the living? Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the desire. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. That which hath been is named already, and it is known that it is man. Neither may he contend with him that is mightier than he. Seeing there be many things that increase vanity, what is man the better? For who knoweth what is good for man in this life, all the days of his vain life which he spendeth as a shadow? For who can tell a man what shall be after him under the sun? We see here the reality of limitations, and we see he summarizes a few things here, 3 summaries of the futility of life. And he begins off with the futility of eating. We don't think too much about the futility of eating, but stop and think about it for a moment. We all know the principle, you don't work, you don't eat. Some of you know that, actually. Those in the working world might know it. Kids are like, I don't know, Dad just gives me my food. I don't know I just look to him for my food and I'm all good. Someday you'll figure it out. I remember in college where you really start to catch the reality of this, like, I either get clothes or I get food or you have to make big decisions about money someday. And it's sometimes hard to do. But we understand the principle that you have to work if you want to eat, right? But think about the futility of that. We work hard and we get our 3 meals today, right? Then we go to bed tonight, we wake up tomorrow, and are we satisfied with our 3 meals from yesterday? No, we're not. We're thinking, I need something to eat right away. So we get up and we get breakfast, we get lunch, we get dinner, 3 more meals paid for. We go back to bed and we wake up the next morning and we want 3 more meals. Wow, that's our life, okay? We live to eat. I mean, that's what we do. We're never satisfied with what we eat. And I believe he's drawing attention here to food, but I think more importantly here, he's giving a universal understanding of things in life and how it works, okay? Just like with food. Food's pretty obvious, okay? We can see that from day to day. Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm not satisfied with just 1 meal in life. I need more than that. The same is true of anything that we find in this world. Are we ever satisfied with what we have right now? Well, the reality is no, we're not, are we? You could be in any stage in life right now. You are not satisfied with your stage in life naturally. You are looking to your next stage in life, hopefully. And then you reach that stage and you want the next stage in life. Your bank account isn't quite full enough yet. You want the next level, right? Your relationship status isn't quite where it needs to be right now, where you'd want it, so you need it to be the next level to find that satisfaction. You get the next level and you're kind of like, this isn't everything I want either. That's the nature of things in this life, and that's what he's drawing attention to here. We're not satisfied with just 1 meal. You ever wonder why? Why is that the case? Pastor Josh, why can we just not be satisfied with getting more things? Why can't we reach a point in this life where we can just be finally satisfied and that's it with the stuff that we have? And he gives us an answer down at verse 7. All the world can offer you, all the world can offer me are physical things to fulfill physical desires. Now, if you look down at verse 7, this is going to make more sense here. That word appetite at the end of verse 7 in the Hebrew literally means soul. Now, if you look back at verse 2 and 3, you'll see the word soul in both those verses. If you look in the Hebrew, all 3 of those words are exactly the same that is used in verse 7 there. So if you were to look at verse 7 and read it, All the labor of man is for his mouth. All he's doing is finding food for his mouth, basically. And yet the appetite or the soul is not fulfilled. What's our problem? We're trying to fill our soul with physical things. The soul is not filled with physical things, and so it may be somewhat satisfied for a moment, but then we continue to want more. We continue to want more because we are made for something greater than just the physical things in life. We have a soul that desires more than just physical things. And we will never, ever be satisfied with just physical things. What advantage does the wise really have over the fool? Good question. There is none. The end is still the same. Good question to ask that Solomon gives there. Or what does it matter if a poor man knows how to get along in the world? Another good question there. We tend to live from desire to desire, don't we? Look down at verse 9. Better is the sight of the eyes than the wandering of the desire. This also is vanity and vexation of spirit. It's saying, basically, it is better to enjoy present possessions, okay, the things that we see, the sight of our eyes, than the uncertainty of potential possessions. That's what that verse is trying to say. Wandering of our desires. So what happens is we see with our eyes. We have what we have, but ultimately we always live within our desires. And so we end up jumping from desire to desire. So as soon as we move to one desire, our natural reaction that we cannot help is we want another desire. Another desire just pops up. You can't help but that happen. That's who we are as people. Living desire to desire. In verse 10, we see the truth that our lives are truly in the hands of God. It says, that which hath been is named already, and it is known that it is man, neither may he contend with him that is mightier than he. We live in God's world. He is the one that made it. He is the one that made us. He is the one that is in control. He is the one that is sovereign over all. Some things about our lives we cannot change. We have no control over who our parents are. We have no control over what kind of kids we have. We have no control over what race we were born into, whether we are male or we were female. Those are things that are in the hands of God, not ourselves. Yet somehow we think that once we're here in this world, we can change that somehow, and that God's hands aren't over everything. What do your eyes see when you look at your life? Are you satisfied, or do you live from desire to desire to desire to desire to desire? A never-ending road. In verse 12, we see also the truth that we can't know what is in our best interest. If you look down, it says, "For who knoweth what is good for man in this life?" We don't know what's best for us. You know, that's a truth that we recognize when we're kids, right? And we say kids, obviously, they don't know what's best for them. That's why we as parents or we as adults, we are there to help them know what is best for the kids, you know? We're like the child who wants to hop the fence so he can get a better look over the edge of the cliff, not, even having a clue that if he falls, he dies over the cliff, right? Like the kid who wants to eat hot dogs and ice cream for every meal all the time. That sounds good at the start, but we as adults, we recognize the foolishness of that and how that does not work. And of course we don't, at least I hope we don't allow our kids to do that, right? So we can quickly recognize that those kids don't understand, but are we any better? We get older and we do the same things. We just have bigger toys and bigger goals, bigger ambitions. But on our own, if we are left to ourselves, on our own flesh, our own lusts, we do the exact same thing as our kids, just with bigger stuff. living from desire to desire, not really knowing what is best for us. That is, who does? Who knows the best? It is God. God is sovereign. God knows all. We do not know what is best for us. We finally see at the end of verse 12 that we don't know the future. We can try to control, to manipulate, to plan all we want. But we can't really know what's coming. Someone once said, all earthly delights are sweeter in expectation than in enjoyment, but all spiritual pleasures more in fruition than in expectation. Folks, this passage, while the message of Solomon may seem kind of dark here, the reality is that it should bring us great peace and contentment as we understand what he is really trying to say. Our enjoyment, our satisfaction cannot be found in the things of this life. Take what you have, all the good that God has given you, and enjoy it. Truly enjoy it. Again, don't misinterpret what's going on here. This isn't a call to you to sell everything and to get rid of everything. And if you're enjoying anything in life right now, then you're probably in sin. That's not the message of tonight at all. Pursue the enjoyments that God has put in your life, but you must always, always, always remember that it is God that gave them to you, and it is God that empowers you to actually enjoy those gifts. And in the moment that God leaves the center of what you have and what you treasure, that is the moment that you will not find satisfaction in life. And you will continue to wander and continue to chase desire after desire after desire. But the key here, the second portion, you recognize God, that God is the giver of what you have, but then you have to, at the same moment, you have to recognize how fragile we really are, right? That's the message of the second portion of this. We don't know what's best for us. It is God. We have to recognize God. I don't know the future. I don't know what's best for me. You do. And not only do I know that, I'm going to take that and I'm going to believe that. I'm going to make that personal to my life right now. So it's a twofold thing. Recognizing the power of God, the sovereignty of God, and then also recognizing that we are not God. That's scary. That's scary for a world that doesn't know Christ, because the reality is in the end, they do know that. You can't get around the fact that you don't know the future. And this future is scary sometimes, and we don't know what tomorrow might bring. But when we as believers understand the truth here, that it does not matter, because we rest in the promise that we serve a sovereign God who does have the best interest for you and for me, and you can always, always, always have faith in that. Who cares where you're at in life right now? You have a God that knows exactly what you are, where you're at and what you need right now. Rest in that. Find your satisfaction in that. You can have all the coffee beans in the world. You can only have a little bit. It doesn't matter. When Christ is at the center, you will find your enjoyment there, your satisfaction there. Stop chasing the rabbits. Stop chasing the desires that creep up into your flesh, into your heart. You won't find it there. The world knows that problem, as we read at the very beginning. That girl knows the problem that's going on, but they do not have the answer. We have the answer, and yet we still struggle with this, don't we? I do. I need to be reminded of this truth daily. Because I know immediately, I sit down and I think, what do I treasure? What do I value the most in life? And I can immediately list off a whole bunch of things that I want right now. And I think that my life would just be a little better right now. But you know what? 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, do you think that list will be the same if I got those things? Nope. I'd have a new list of new and bigger and better and greater things. Salvation is where it begins. And those that are saved in here have experienced that first step in pursuing satisfaction with God at the center. But life is a continued battle of constantly giving back to God what we so selfishly think is ours. Whether that's your possessions or whether that's your family. God wants you to enjoy your life. truly enjoy your life. The world does not understand and will not understand unless they come to the saving truth, the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ. In order to enjoy life, we must first redefine and realign our values with God's. And when we humble ourselves, admit our weakness and our inability, and we recognize Him, that's the secret to finding the power of satisfaction in the things that God has so graciously and lovingly given us. Christ must be at the center. Are you finding your satisfaction in Him alone? It can't be part. You can't say, I'm finding my satisfaction in God and these other things. No, God has to be the center of every single thing. And then you enjoy those things He's given with Him there at the center. Would you bow your heads?